As a nighttime taxi driver, I have seen more than most could imagine. I have witnessed fleeting encounters on deserted streets, heard whispers of dark secrets floating in the air, and felt the presence of something ancient and malevolent lurking in the darkest corners of the city. I am a solitary observer in this vast urban landscape, a witness to the secrets that lie hidden in the shadows. My life is marked by darkness, by the visions that torment me in the late hours of the night. Since I was young, I have felt a connection to the supernatural, an ability to see beyond the surface reality and uncover the secrets that lie deep within. But with this gift comes a heavy burden. I have seen things that the human mind should not witness. I have faced dangers beyond comprehension. And yet, I press on, driven by an innate need to uncover the truth behind the shadows. This is my story, a chronicle of my encounters with the unknown, with the darkness that lurks in the darkest corners of the city. Join me on this journey through the shadows, where truth is stranger than fiction, and where danger waits around every corner. My name is John, and this is my dark night. The city comes alive in the darkness. At night, the city has its own language. It's a constant murmur of whispers, broken promises, and secrets hidden in every shadow. The sounds of the night are different from those of the day. They are denser, heavier. I know every corner, every alley, every shadow. To me, those shadows are my companions. I'm John, and I've been a nighttime taxi driver for the last 10 years. My life begins when most people's ends, when the lights go out and the noise of the day fades into an unsettling silence. I can say with certainty that the true nature of the city is revealed when the sun sets. My office is a black cab that has seen better days. A mid-90s Ford Crown Victoria. Its engine purrs like an old, tired feline but is reliable. The upholstery is worn, and there's a thin layer of dust that seems impossible to remove. But I like it that way. It has character, like me. Every night, my shift starts at 8 p.m., when the city begins to close up like a book that only a few have access to after dark. I drive to the taxi base and pick up the keys from the dispatch office. Jack, the night manager, is always there with his coffee thermos and a cigarette in hand. "Good evening, John," he says, almost always without looking at me. His eyes are fixed on the TV hanging in the corner, showing the local news. "Good evening, Jack," I respond as I sign the log and take the keys. That night began like any other. The dashboard clock read 8 p.m. when I got into the driver's seat. The cab already smelled of cigarettes and stale coffee when I got in. I don't mind. It's part of the ritual, the routine that gives me a strange sense of comfort. I adjusted the rearview mirror and turned on the radio, searching for a station that wasn't full of ads. "Good evening, old friend," I said to the cab as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine responded with a familiar purr, and soon we were rolling down the cobblestone streets. The traffic was light, just a few scattered cars, and the summer night breeze slipped in through the partially open window. The first part of my shift is usually quiet. Most of my customers at that hour are office workers who stayed late or young couples heading out for dinner. However, something in the air that night felt different. There was a tension, a sort of static electricity that made my skin prickle. Then the slower hours arrive. I pick up night shift workers, people who have had too much to drink, and couples who don't want their night to end. Sometimes there are conversations, sometimes just silence. I prefer the silence. It allows me to listen to the city, to catch those murmurs that only those who live by night can hear. My favorite places are the old neighborhoods. Narrow, cobblestone streets that tell stories with every bump and crack. There's something about the old architecture, the flickering yellow lights, that makes me feel connected to a past I never knew. Tonight is no different. The first hours pass without incident. Faces blur together, and addresses are forgotten as soon as they are given. My first customer appeared at the corner of 64th Street and 5th Avenue. He was a middle-aged man with a briefcase in one hand and a tired expression on his face. I greeted him with a smile, though he barely looked at me as he got into the cab. "To the Empire and Hotel, please," he said in a monotone voice. I nodded and started the car. The ride was silent, except for the soft murmur of the radio. I realized I had grown too accustomed to the silence, to the fleeting company of my passengers. I dropped the man off at the hotel entrance, and when he got out, I felt a slight sense of relief. "Have a good night," I said, though he was already walking toward the revolving doors. The next hour passed without incident. I picked up a couple of tourists and an elderly woman going to visit her sister. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the routine of every night. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. At 11:30, I stopped at a 24-hour diner for a coffee. The place was nearly empty, except for a couple of college students who seemed to be cramming for an exam and a waitress who was cleaning the counter with a distracted air. "A black coffee, please," I asked the waitress. She nodded and started to prepare it. While I waited, I looked out the window. The street was deserted, and the neon lights flickered weakly in the distance. I took a sip of coffee, feeling the comforting warmth spread through my body. I finished my coffee and left the diner, returning to my cab. I drive through the deserted streets, feeling like the night is watching me, like the city has eyes on every corner. I head to my next stop, a bar on the outskirts. It's a place that has seen too many fights and too many fleeting reconciliations. The customers are always the same, seeking forgetfulness at the bottom of a glass. At 1 in the morning, I park near Central Park. I like to take a break here, stretch my legs, and feel the fresh air. The full moon bathes the city in a silver glow. There's something hypnotic about moonlight, something that has always fascinated me. I lean against the cab, lighting a cigarette and looking toward the fountain in the center of the park. The water looks like liquid silver under the moon. A faint sound startles me. It's just a can rolling down the sidewalk, pushed by a breeze I barely feel. But in the stillness of the night, any noise seems louder, more urgent. I finish my cigarette and return to the cab. It's already late, and the darkest hours are yet to come. My next passenger is a middle-aged man dressed in a suit that has seen better days. He smells of alcohol and failure. He gives me an address in the financial district without lifting his gaze. "Long night?" I ask, just to break the ice. He nods, looking out the window. There are no more words between us. Sometimes, passengers don't need to talk, and I don't need to listen. They just need to get to their destination, and I just need to drive. When I drop him off at his destination, a strange feeling washes over me. It's not fear, exactly, but a sort of premonition. Something is about to change. I look at the clock, it's 2 in the morning. The hour of shadows when the city reveals its darkest secrets. This is my life. A nighttime routine that gives me comfort and, at the same time, a sense of isolation. But tonight, something in the air tells me that my world is about to change. I don't know if for better or for worse, but I feel it in my bones. The night, with all its secrets and shadows, is about to reveal itself in a way I never imagined. The night feels colder than usual as I drive through increasingly deserted streets. The clock on the dashboard shows 3 in the morning, the hour when silence becomes deafening and darkness seems denser. It's at this moment that I see a man on a corner, under a flickering street light. He raises his hand, and I approach slowly, feeling a chill run down my spine. The man is tall and thin, wearing a long, dark coat that reaches his ankles. His face is partially hidden by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He gets into the taxi without a word, and the air inside becomes oppressive. It smells damp and metallic, like iron. "Where to?" I ask, looking in the rearview mirror. His dark eyes meet mine, and I feel a knot in my stomach. 23 Phoenix Street, he says in a low, raspy voice. His tone brooks no questions, and I ask none. I drive in silence, feeling his gaze fixed on the back of my head. Phoenix Street isn't a part of the city I don't frequent much. It's a narrow, old street with worn brick buildings and windows that seem like blind eyes watching the street. When we arrive at number 23, the house is the darkest of them all, with peeling paint and a door that looks like it has been forgotten by time. "This is it," the man says, extending a bill toward me without moving from his seat. I take it and notice his hand is cold as ice. "Do you need help with anything else?" I ask, more out of courtesy than genuine interest. I want him out of the taxi as soon as possible. He shakes his head and opens the door. As he gets out, a cold wind enters the car, making me shiver. I slam the door shut and look in the rearview mirror, but the man has already disappeared into the darkness. I stay parked in front of the house for a few seconds, trying to shake off the feeling of uneasy left behind. I take a deep breath and prepare to turn around when I notice something in the back seat. It's an old photo, with worn edges and sepia tones. I pick up the photo carefully. It shows a small boy standing in front of a house that, upon closer inspection, is the same house I just dropped the man off at. The boy has a serious, almost sad expression, and behind him, a blurry figure barely distinguishable. I feel a deeper chill. Something about the photo feels unsettlingly familiar, but I can't pinpoint what it is. I decide to put it in the glove compartment, thinking the man might come back for it. Regardless, I can't get it out of my head. The rest of the night passes in a kind of haze. Passengers blur together and destinations fade in my memory. All except that man in the photo. When my shift finally ends and I return to the base, dawn is beginning to tint the sky a pale gray. I finally take the photo out of the glove compartment. I look at it once more, trying to find some detail I might have missed. The blurry figure behind the boy seems clearer now, as if watching me directly from the photograph. A disturbing thought crosses my mind. Who is that man? And why do I feel this is just the beginning of something much darker? "Everything okay, John?" Jack asks, noticing my expression. "Yeah, just a long night," I reply, trying to sound nonchalant. I put the photo in my pocket, drop off the keys, and leave the base, but the feeling of unease doesn't leave me. At home, I can barely sleep. The image of the boy in the house repeats in my mind, like a persistent echo. I have no answers, only questions that haunt me as the city wakes to a new day. I know I have to find out more about the house on Phoenix Street, about the boy in the photo, and about the mysterious man who left this unsettling piece of the puzzle in my taxi. The next night can't come fast enough because deep inside, a voice tells me this story is far from over. The day passes in a sort of lethargy. I can't stop thinking about the photo and the man who left it in my taxi. As the city wakes up and fills with life, I feel trapped in a loop of shadows and mystery. When the sun finally starts to set, I feel a strange sense of relief. Night is approaching, and with it, the possibility of finding answers. I arrive at the taxi base earlier than usual. Jack looks at me curiously but says nothing. I'm not in the mood for small talk today. I grab the taxi keys and leave quickly. The car starts with its familiar purr, and I head toward Phoenix Street. The neighborhood looks different in the dim twilight. More sinister, older. When I reach number 23, the house appears even more neglected than the night before. I sit in the car for a few minutes, watching. There are no signs of life. The door is closed, and the windows, darkened by dirt, reveal nothing inside. Finally, I decide to get out. The photo is in my pocket, carefully folded. I walk to the door, each step echoing in the deserted street. I knock softly at first, then harder. No response. I try the doorknob, and to my surprise, the door creaks open. The darkness inside the house is almost tangible. I take out the flashlight I always keep in the taxi and turn it on, its faint light barely cutting through the gloom. The air smells of damp and dust, mixed with something else, something that reminds me of the metallic smell in the taxi the night before. I walk cautiously through the foyer, passing furniture covered with old sheets. The floor creaks under my feet as if protesting my presence. I keep moving until I reach a living room. There's a portrait on the wall, covered in dust. I wipe it with my hand and see the same house, but in better times. In the portrait, a family, a man, a woman, and a child. The same child from the photo. A dull noise makes me turn quickly. The flashlight illuminates a partially open door. I approach, my heart pounding. I push the door open and find a small room, probably an office. In the center of the room is an old desk. On it, a worn leather diary. I open it carefully. The first pages are filled with daily entries, mundane notes about everyday life. But as I read on, the entries become more disturbing. They speak of shadows in the night, of whispers that no one else can hear. The diary's owner seems convinced that something dark and evil has invaded their home. One entry in particular catches my attention. October 14th, 1952. John, my son, has started talking about an imaginary friend. He says it lives in the house and visits him at night. I'm worried. Lately, the noises and shadows seem more intense. I feel like something is watching us. I must protect my family. John. The boy in the photo is named John, just like me. The discovery sends a shiver down my spine. I keep reading, eager for more answers. October 23rd, 1952. Last night, John's friend appeared in my room. It wasn't imaginary. It was real and terrible. Its dark figure slid across the room, and its eyes, oh, its eyes. We must leave this place, but I fear it's too late. Suddenly, a loud noise comes from upstairs. I drop the diary and run up the stairs, not thinking about the danger. The flashlight flickers as I climb, barely lighting the way. I reach a door at the end of the hallway, where the sound is coming from. The door opens with a groan, revealing a child's bedroom. In the center, a small bed and an open wardrobe. Inside the wardrobe, something glows faintly. I approach and see a small trunk. I open it with trembling hands and find more photos, all of the boy, John, in different parts of the house. In some, a dark shadow can be seen near him, always present, always watching. The air grows colder, and I feel a presence behind me. I turn quickly, but there's no one there. Fear grips me. I need to get out of here. Quickly, I pocket some of the photos and run toward the exit. When I finally leave the house, the night air has never felt so refreshing. I pause for a moment to catch my breath and look back. The house looks imposing and threatening under the moonlight. I get back in the taxi and start the engine, not looking back. My thoughts are a whirlwind of images and words. The diary, the shadow, the boy. There's something very dark in this story, and now I'm at the center of it. Back home, I study the photos. One in particular catches my attention. It's of the boy, standing in front of a mirror. In the reflection, a shadowy figure can be seen clearly, with the same dark eyes as the man I drove in my taxi. I need to know more. I need answers. After the unsettling visit to the house on Phoenix Street, the next day passes in a blur. I can't stop thinking about what I found, the journal, the photos, the shadow. It all feels like a fever dream, but the evidence is there, in my hands. I try to rest, but sleep eludes me. My mind keeps replaying the events, searching for logic in the chaos. Finally, night falls, and with it, my urge to return to my taxi routine. I need answers, and I have a feeling I'll find them in the city's shadows. My shift starts as usual, with Jack handing me the keys and a sleepy nod. I get into the taxi, check the glove compartment to make sure the photos and journal are there, and head out. I drive through familiar streets, but everything feels different, charged with an almost palpable tension. It's around midnight when the first vision occurs. I'm at a red light, waiting for it to change. Suddenly, the back seat seems to grow cold. I glance in the rearview mirror and, for an instant, see the shadowy figure sitting there, staring at me with those dark, penetrating eyes. I blink, and the vision is gone, leaving me with a cold sweat on my forehead. It's just your imagination, John, I tell myself, trying to stay calm. But the feeling that I'm not alone lingers. The next vision is even more vivid. A solitary figure stands on the sidewalk, under the flickering light of a street lamp. It's hard to make out its features, but something about its posture catches my attention. It seems lost, as if waiting for something or someone. I'm driving down a quiet street when the taxi radio starts crackling and switching stations on its own. The static gives way to a whispering voice, barely audible but clearly sinister. You shouldn't have gotten involved in this, John. Now there's no turning back. I switch off the radio abruptly, my heart pounding. The streets seem darker, the shadows deeper. I keep driving, trying to stay calm. But every corner, every deserted street seems to harbor something more, something I can't see but can feel. A couple of hours later, I pick up a young woman downtown. She looks pale and nervous. She sits in the back seat and gives me an address in a low voice. Are you okay? I ask, trying to sound calm. Yes, just a bad night, she replies, not looking at me. I drive in silence, but I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. I glance in the rearview mirror from time to time, expecting to see something out of the ordinary. And then it happens. I see the young woman in the mirror, but behind her, the shadowy figure appears again, its dark eyes fixed on me. I try to stay calm and keep driving, but my hands tremble on the wheel. When we reach her destination, the woman gets out quickly without a word. I look in the rearview mirror once more, but the figure is gone. I sit for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath and regain my composure. This can't go on, I murmur, rubbing my temples. The visions are getting worse, and I feel like I'm losing control. I decided to take a break and park near Central Park. I get out of the taxi and sit on a bench, trying to clear my mind. The city is silent, but the silence no longer comforts me. I look up at the sky, seeking some sign of peace, but all I find is the full moon, bright and cold. Suddenly, I hear footsteps behind me. I turn quickly, but there's no one there. The park is deserted. But then, I see something at the fountain in the center of the park. The shadowy figure is there, watching me. I can't move, I can't scream. I can only stare. The figure raises a hand, pointing at me. And then, like a gust of wind, it vanishes. I sit there, trembling, feeling the weight of a presence I can't understand but know is dangerous. I return to the taxi, determined to finish my shift as quickly as possible. I drive aimlessly, just wanting to get away from whatever might be following me. But the visions don't stop. Every time I look in the rearview mirror, I expect to see those dark eyes, that shadowy figure. When my shift finally ends and I return to the base, I'm exhausted. Jack looks at me with concern. "John, are you okay?" he asks. "Yeah, just a tough night," I reply, knowing it's an understatement. I leave the keys and walk out of the base, the dawn starting to break. But I don't feel relief. I feel the darkness following me, even in the daylight. At home, I go through the photos in the journal again, searching for any clue that might help me understand what's happening. I need to know who the shadowy figure is, what it wants, and how to stop it. The last entry in the journal echoes in my mind. "We must leave here, but I'm afraid it's too late." The words feel like a warning, one I must take seriously. But leaving isn't an option. Not until I know the truth. I'm determined to face the darkness, no matter the cost. The day unfolds with a palpable tension in the air. Every passing minute brings me closer to the night, and with it, the answers I seek. I try to sleep, but my mind refuses to rest. Visions of the shadowy figure, the dark eyes, and the child in the photograph whirl in a disturbing maelstrom. When the sun finally sets, I feel both relieved and terrified. I arrive at the base earlier than usual. Jack isn't there, and the office is empty and silent. I grab the taxi keys swiftly, as if the very base is laden with negative energy. Today, my plan is clear: return to Phoenix Street and confront whatever is lurking in the shadows. The journey to the house is darker than ever. The streets seem deserted, and every street lamp flickers as if about to fade. When I arrive, the house stands imposing and menacing, its windows like empty eyes watching me. I take a deep breath and step out of the taxi, flashlight in one hand and the photos and diary in the other. I push the door open, which creaks, and step into the darkness. The air is cold and dense, as if the house itself is breathing. I head straight to the office where I found the diary. I need more answers, and I know they are here somewhere. I turn on the flashlight and scan the shelves filled with dusty books and yellowed papers. Something on one of the shelves catches my eye, a small, worn-out box. I open it carefully and find a series of letters. Each one is addressed to someone named Mary. I read the first letter. It's from John's father, the child in the photo. It talks about his concern for the family's safety, mentions the shadows and the dark figure haunting them. Each letter reveals more details, a tale of terror and desperation growing increasingly intense. Dear Mary, the shadows have become more persistent. John keeps talking about his imaginary friend, but now I'm sure it's something more. Something evil. Last night, I saw it again. It was in the hallway, watching me. I couldn't move, just stare. We must leave, but I fear it may not be enough. With love, Michael. The words echo in my mind as a chill runs through me. This family story is tragic and dark, but there's something more here, something I still don't understand. Suddenly, I hear a noise upstairs, in the child's room. The same dull sound I heard last time. I climb the stairs with my heart pounding, the flashlight trembling in my hand. When I reach the door, I push it open carefully and step inside. The room is as I left it, but there's something different. In the center, on the bed, there's an old music box. It wasn't here before. I approach and open it. The melody is soft but strangely discordant, as if each note is slightly out of tune. As the music plays, a whispering voice fills the room. John, you must leave. It's not safe here. The voice is feminine, gentle yet urgent. I look around, but I see no one. The music box continues to play, the melody growing increasingly unsettling. Suddenly, the door slams shut, and the room fills with a tangible darkness. The flashlight flickers and goes out, leaving me in complete darkness. I try to turn it back on, but it doesn't respond. Then, I feel a presence behind me. I don't need to see to know it's the shadowy figure. I spin around quickly, but there's nothing there. The sensation of being watched is overwhelming. The whispering voice returns, closer this time. You must find the key. It's the only way to stop him. The key? What key? Before I can question further, the flashlight flickers back on, and the shadowy figure is in front of me, its dark eyes gleaming malevolently. I feel paralyzing fear, but also fierce determination. I can't let this entity control me. I rush to the door and yank it open, fleeing the room and racing down the stairs. The air around me feels heavier, as if the house itself is alive and trying to trap me. I reach the office and stop, trying to catch my breath. The letters, the diary, the photos. Everything must have a connection. I frantically search the office, moving books and papers until I find a small, rusty key hidden in a secret compartment of the desk. The key glints dimly under the flashlight's beam. I feel this is the missing piece, the element that can make sense of everything. With the key in hand, I leave the house and return to the taxi. The cold night air feels revitalizing, but I know I'm still not safe. I sit in the taxi and close my eyes for a moment, trying to sort out my thoughts. The whispering voice said the key was the only way to stop him. But stop what exactly? The shadowy figure, the entity haunting this house and me. I need to find out more, and quickly. I drive back to the base, my mind racing. I need to research more about this house, about Michael and Mary's family, and about what really happened here. The puzzle pieces are starting to fit together, but there's still much to uncover. Back home, I open my laptop and start searching. Old articles, property records, anything that could shed light on the history of the house on Phoenix Street. I find a newspaper article from the 1950s about the disappearance of a family. The photo in the article shows Michael, Mary, and young John. The story mentions strange events in the house, but the family was never found. The key is in the house, in the secrets it still holds. I'm determined to confront the darkness and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The following night arrives with a mixture of anticipation and fear. I've spent the day investigating more about the family and the house on Phoenix Street. Newspaper articles and old records paint a picture of mystery and tragedy. The family vanished without a trace, and the house has remained vacant ever since. Neighbors spoke of strange noises and shadows in the windows, but no one dared to get too close. I mentally prepare myself for whatever I might find tonight. The small, rusty key in my pocket is a constant reminder that there is something more waiting to be discovered. When I reach the taxi base, Jack looks at me with concern. "Are you sure you're okay, John?" "You seem different," he says, his voice filled with genuine worry. "Just a bit tired, but I'll be fine," I reply, trying to sound convincing. I grab the taxi keys and leave quickly. I drive through streets illuminated by flickering street lamps, every shadow seeming to move on its own. My destination is clear, the house on Phoenix Street. I arrive at the house and sit in the taxi for a moment, observing the dark and deteriorated facade. The key in my pocket feels heavier than it should. I take a deep breath and step out of the car, determined to face whatever awaits me inside. I push the door, which opens with a familiar creak, and enter the darkness. The flashlight illuminates the foyer, and I head straight to the office where I found the letters and the diary. I feel like the answer is here, somewhere. I place the key on the desk and examine it under the flashlight's beam. It's small and plain, but its presence seems to fill the room with a sense of anticipation. I review the letters in the diary again, searching for any clue about what this key might unlock. An entry in Michael's diary mentions a special place in the house, a secret refuge where he kept the most important things for his family. I read the entry carefully. October 25th, 1952. I've hidden our most precious belongings in the refuge, behind the fireplace in the living room. If something happens to us, I hope someone finds it and understands what happened here. The living room. I head there with the flashlight, feeling that each step brings me closer to the truth. The fireplace is covered in dust and cobwebs, but behind it, I find a loose panel. With considerable effort, I manage to move it and discover a small door secured with an old padlock. The key fits perfectly into the lock. With a satisfying click, the door opens, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, I find a wooden box and some documents. The box is filled with family photos, memories of better times. The documents, however, tell a different story. I read the pages with growing horror. Michael and Mary had discovered that the house was built on land that, according to local legends, was cursed. An ancient dark figure, an evil spirit, had been sealed here centuries ago. The construction of the house had disturbed the seal, releasing the spirit that now haunted the family. One of Michael's recent letters to Mary mentions a ritual to contain the spirit, but they never had the chance to perform it. The instructions are detailed and precise but require certain objects that must still be in the house. The first object is a family reliquary, which according to the instructions, should be in John's room. I cautiously climb the stairs, every creak of the floor amplifying my anxiety. In the child's room, I search among the toys and books until I find a small silver reliquary. The second object is an ancient book, which should be in the house's library. I head to a room I hadn't explored yet. The library is a dark and dusty place, filled with shelves that stretch to the ceiling. After a meticulous search, I find the book, a heavy volume with inscriptions in a language I don't recognize. With both objects in hand, I return to the living room. I follow the ritual instructions, placing the reliquary and the book in specific positions around the fireplace. The words I must recite are written in Michael's diary, but before I start, I feel a presence behind me. The shadowy figure is there, watching me. Its dark eyes seem to gleam with ancient malice. I feel a mixture of terror and determination. I can't stop now. I begin reciting the ritual words, my voice trembling at first but gaining strength with each word. The room's temperature drops drastically. The shadowy figure advances toward me, but I continue reciting, with a firmer voice. The words seem to resonate on the walls, filling the house with palpable energy. The figure stops, as if an invisible barrier is holding it back. The house shakes, and a cold wind fills the living room. Shadows swirl, and the shadowy figure lets out a deafening scream. I keep reciting the words, feeling the power of the ritual reaching its peak. With a final scream, the shadowy figure dissolves into the air, leaving a sense of calm and relief. The house falls silent, as if freed from an ancient weight. I collapse to the floor, exhausted but victorious. After a few minutes, I get up, put away the reliquary and the book. I must ensure that this story is not forgotten. Michael's family deserves to rest in peace, and I need to fully understand what has happened here. I leave the house and return to the taxi. The night is quiet, but this time, the silence doesn't scare me. I feel like I've faced something dark and emerged victorious, but I also know that my quest for answers is not over. I drive back to the base, my mind filled with thoughts and plans to uncover more about the shadowy figure and the ancient spirit that haunted the house. Dawn brings a sense of temporary relief. The house on Phoenix Street has revealed some of its secrets, but many questions remain unanswered. I spend the day reflecting on the ritual and the shadowy figure. The feeling of having won a small battle doesn't dispel the certainty that the war is far from over. As the sun begins to set, I prepare for another night in the taxi. I feel a mix of fear and determination, yet I'm convinced I must press on. The key lies in understanding more about the curse that has affected the house and, by extension, myself. I arrive at the taxi base, and Jack watches me curiously. "You look better today, John. Did you rest well?" he asks, with a lighter tone. "Somewhat, Jack." "Somewhat," I reply with a tired smile. I step out onto the street. The familiar purr of the taxi's engine comforts me. Tonight, my plan is different. I want to speak with someone who knows the city's history well, someone who can give me more context about the curse. There's a local historian, Mr. Williams, known for his knowledge of urban legends and myths. I decide to visit his house and see if he can assist me. I drive to his address, an old house in the city's historic district. I ring the bell and wait, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. Mr. Williams opens the door. He's an older man, with gray hair and thick glasses. His expression is serious yet kind. "Good evening. How can I help you?" he asks, eyeing the taxi parked behind me. "I'm John, a taxi driver. I need to talk to you about something I've discovered on Phoenix Street." "I believe you might have answers," I say, trying to sound confident. Williams nods and invites me in. His house is filled with books and antiques, a kind of sanctuary for a man dedicated to preserving the past, a place steeped in history. He offers me a cup of tea, and we sit in his study. "Tell me, John, what brings you here?" he asks, observing me closely. I tell him everything: the visions, the house, Michael's diary, the ritual. Williams listens in silence, occasionally nodding. When I finish, he leans forward and sighs. The history of the house on Phoenix Street is ancient and tragic. Centuries ago, that land was considered sacred by local tribes. It was said that an evil spirit was sealed there by a powerful shaman. When they built the house, they broke the seal, releasing the spirit, Williams explains, his eyes gleaming with knowledge. "So, the shadowy figure is that spirit?" I ask, feeling a chill. "Yes, most likely. The ritual you performed must have temporarily contained it, but spirits of that kind are persistent. You'll need something more to permanently seal it," Williams says, getting up and searching among his books. He retrieves an old, heavy-looking book and places it on the table. He opens it to a page full of symbols and diagrams. "This is a more ancient and powerful ritual, but it requires a sacrifice," he says, his tone grave. "A sacrifice?" I repeat, feeling a knot in my stomach. Not necessarily a human sacrifice, but something of great personal value. Something with a strong emotional connection to you. That kind of offering can appease the spirit and seal it once more, he explains, watching me seriously. I think about what I could use. My thoughts turn to a particular object, a chain with a locket that belonged to my mother. She gave it to me before she passed away, saying it would always protect me. The idea of sacrificing it hurts deeply, but if it means ridding myself of the spirit, I'm willing to do it. "I think I have something that might work," I say, my voice trembling. Williams nods and gives me further instructions on the ritual. He warns me that the process will be dangerous and that I must be prepared for anything. I leave Mr. Williams's house with the book and instructions, feeling heavy-hearted but determined. I drive to my apartment, searching for my mother's chain. I find it in a memory box. The locket shines softly under the light. The night is swiftly advancing, and I know I must return to the house on Phoenix Street. I drive with a sense of urgency, feeling that every minute counts. Upon arrival, the house looks more sinister than ever, as if it knows what I am about to do. I enter cautiously, flashlight in one hand and the ritual book in the other. The house is silent, but the air feels charged with electricity. I head to the living room and prepare the area around the fireplace, placing the locket in the center of the circle of symbols I've drawn. I begin reciting the words of the ritual. My voice echoes in the empty room. The temperature drops drastically, and the shadows begin to move around me. The shadowy figure appears, its dark eyes gleaming with malevolence. I feel its hatred and desperation. This is the end, I say, more to myself than to the spirit. The locket begins to glow intensely, and a blinding light fills the room. I continue reciting the words, my voice growing stronger. The shadowy figure screams, a haunting sound that seems to shake the house's foundations. Suddenly, everything falls silent. The shadowy figure dissipates, vanishing into thin air. The light fades slowly, leaving the room in a strange yet comforting calm. I collapse to the floor, exhausted but relieved. My mother's locket has disintegrated, but I feel that her spirit has helped me win this battle. I leave the house for the last time, knowing I have closed a dark chapter in Phoenix Street's history. I drive back to the base, my mind filled with thoughts but my heart lighter. Tonight, I will finally be able to rest. But I also know that there will always be shadows lurking in the corners of our reality, waiting to be discovered. And although this battle has ended, my quest for truth and my fight against darkness continue. I am ready to face whatever comes, armed with the knowledge and determination that this experience has given me. After the confrontation on Phoenix Street, I expected an uneasy peace. The weight of my mother's locket still lingered in my heart, but the air was no longer thick with the malevolent presence that had plagued the house. With the shadowy figure seemingly contained, I wondered if we had truly seen the end of the nightmare. The next night, I found myself back in the taxi. I drove aimlessly through the city, trying to process everything that had happened. The streets were oddly quiet, as if the city itself was taking a breath after the storm. However, the tranquility didn't last long. I received an emergency call on the taxi's radio. A woman needed to be picked up in a remote area near the woods. Her voice on the radio sounded urgent, and though my instincts told me to avoid lonely places after what I had been through, I couldn't ignore the call. I drove to the specified location, a dark and deserted road flanked by tall, menacing trees. The figure of a woman emerged from the shadows, her silhouette illuminated by the taxi's headlights. She looked frightened and trembling. "Do you need help?" I asked as I rolled down the window. "Yes, please. My car broke down, and I have no phone signal," she said, her voice laden with anxiety. I opened the door, and she quickly got in, closing it behind her with a sigh of relief. I watched her through the rearview mirror. She was young, with disheveled hair and eyes filled with fear. "Where can I take you?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Anywhere away from here, please," she said, her voice trembling. As I drove, I tried to engage her in conversation to calm her down. "What happened to your car?" I asked. "It just stopped. I've been having issues with it lately, but this time was different. I felt like something was trying to stop me," she replied, nervously looking out the window. Her response put me on edge. There was something in her voice, a sense of fear that resonated with my own recent experiences. "Something?" I asked, trying to gather more information. She hesitated before responding. I know it sounds crazy, but I felt a presence. Something dark. like someone was watching me from the woods. A chill ran down my spine. There was something familiar about her words, something that reminded me of the shadowy figure. "Can you describe it?" I asked, trying to remain calm. She nodded slowly. They were shadows, moving in an unnatural way. And there was a figure. I couldn't see it clearly, but I felt its gaze. It was cold, like it wanted to trap me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This couldn't be a coincidence. Was there something beyond the house on Phoenix Street? Something we hadn't yet discovered? I decided to take her to the nearest police station. As I drove, I briefly told her about my own experiences with the shadows and the shadowy figure. Her expression shifted from fear to a mix of understanding and surprise. "So, I'm not crazy?" she asked, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, you're not. There's something out there, something we unwittingly awakened," I said, feeling a new wave of determination. We arrived at the police station, and after ensuring she was safe, I returned to the taxi. I needed answers, and I knew I had to go back to Mr. Williams. I drove quickly to his house, urgently ringing the doorbell. Mr. Williams opened the door, his expression shifting from surprise to concern upon seeing me. "John, what happened?" he asked, inviting me inside. I told him about the woman in the woods and the presence I had sensed. Williams frowned, clearly worried. "This is bigger than I thought," he said, pulling more books and documents from his shelves. "The shadowy figure you faced on Phoenix Street may just be a manifestation of something much older and more powerful. What can we do?" I asked, feeling the situation becoming increasingly desperate. "We need to find the source of this curse. Something or someone has disturbed a very ancient balance. The house on Phoenix Street may be just one of many anchor points for this entity," Williams explained, frantically flipping through his books. We spent hours poring over ancient texts and city maps. We discovered that the house on Phoenix Street wasn't the only one built on sacred grounds. There were several similar places in the city, all connected by a network of dark energies. We need to investigate these places and uncover what connects them. Only then can we stop this threat once and for all, Williams said, his voice resolute. I felt overwhelmed but also determined. This fight was far from over, and now I had a new purpose. With Mr. Williams's help, I was determined to unravel the mystery and confront the shadows lurking in the darkness. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge and determination this experience had given me. I wasn't alone in this fight, and together, we were going to uncover the truth and restore the broken balance. I knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but I also knew it was the only path forward. With one last glance at the scattered books and maps on Mr. Williams's table, I left, resolved to confront the shadows once more. The city sprawled before me, a web of blinking lights stretching to the horizon. With the weight of the night on my shoulders, I headed towards the first point of interest Mr. Williams and I had identified on our map, an old abandoned cemetery on the outskirts of the city. Driving through the empty streets gave me time to reflect. My conversation with Mr. Williams had revealed the gravity of the situation. We were facing something ancient and powerful, a force that had been unleashed unchecked. But we also had an advantage, the knowledge and determination to confront it. I arrived at the cemetery and turned off the taxi's engine. The night was quiet, only interrupted by the whisper of wind through the tombstones. I got out of the vehicle, feeling a mix of anticipation tinged with a touch of fear. What secrets and dangers awaited among the shadows? Mr. Williams and I had carefully planned our strategy. We would explore the cemetery for any signs of supernatural activity. If we found anything suspicious, we would use the knowledge and rituals we had learned to try to contain the threat. Armed with a flashlight and a protective cross that Williams had given me, I began to walk among the graves. The air was filled with a sense of unease, as if the spirits of the departed were watching me from the shadows. After exploring for some time, I detected a strange emanation of energy coming from one of the oldest graves in the cemetery. I approached cautiously, the flashlight illuminating the worn inscription on the tombstone. It was an unnamed grave, covered in moss and forgotten by time. As I drew nearer, I felt a pressure in the air, as if something was trying to push me back. I raised the protective cross, feeling its power resonate through me. The shadows stirred, and a dark figure emerged from the grave, twisted and malevolent in form. With a trembling voice, I began to recite an ancient containment spell, urging the entity to retreat. The shadowy figure emitted a frustrated scream but slowly backed away, unable to resist the power of the ritual. When the figure finally disappeared, the cemetery fell silent once more. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest but also filled with a sense of triumph. Once again, we had succeeded in containing the darkness that lurked in the shadows. I returned to the taxi, feeling the weight of the night on my shoulders. I had faced another threat, but I knew there were many more to come. With every step towards the truth, I realized the magnitude of the task ahead of us. I knew there were more places to explore, more secrets to uncover. But I also knew I was not alone in this fight. With Mr. Williams by my side and my determination as my guide, I was ready to face whatever fate threw my way. I find myself in the taxi, watching the glow of dawn as I head back home. It has been some time since I last confronted the shadows lurking in the depths of the city, and although peace seems to have returned, I know that darkness is never far away. My encounters with the supernatural have left their mark on me, but they have also given me a deeper understanding of the nature of the world around me. I have learned that darkness and light exist in a fragile balance, and it is our responsibility to protect that balance, even when darkness threatens to consume us. The taxi stops in front of my apartment, and I get out with a sigh of relief. The night may have ended, but I know my journey is far from over. With each new experience, each new encounter with the unknown, I will continue forward, ready to face whatever fate has in store for me.